Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation, Identifying High-Risk Employees. The information presented by the expert is not to be used as legal advice and does not indicate a working relationship with the expert. All materials obtained from this presentation are merely for educational purposes and should not be used in a court of law sans the expert consent, i.e. a business relationship where she or he is hired for your particular case. In today's webinar, Tim Dimoff will discuss how to identify various types of high-risk behaviors, limitations on checking out prospective employees, identify specific physical signs and behavioral patterns that every company needs to be aware of, how high-risk employees can impact a company culture, how high-risk employees can affect coworkers. To give you a little background about our presenter, Tim Dimoff is the founder and president of SACS Consulting Investigative Services, Incorporated, which is considered one of the nation's leading authorities in high-risk workplace and human resource issues, security, vulnerability assessment, and crime. He is known as a speaker, trainer, investigator, and author, and has appeared on national radio and television shows and major newspapers. Tim is a nationally recognized expert on violent behavior and criminal investigation and has provided crime commentary and profiling analysis and has appeared on shows such as MSNBC, CNN, and Court TV. His expertise includes high-risk and security issues, human resource issues, corporate investigations, liability issues from hiring to firing, drugs and substance abuse, identity theft, law enforcement procedures, and victim justice. He has testified as an expert witness in many trials throughout his career. Attendees who require passcode, the word for today is employees. During the Q&A session, we ask that you enter this passcode into the Q&A widget for CLE reporting purposes. The Q&A is located to the left of your screen. Please remember that if you're applying for CLE credit, you must log onto your computer as yourself and stay for the full 60 minutes. You are also required to complete the survey at the end of the program. Please note that CLE credit cannot be given to those watching together on a single computer. Tomorrow morning, we will send out an email with a link to the archive recording of the webinar. The slides can be downloaded from the resource list at the widget at the bottom of your screen. Thank you all for attending today, and Tim, the presentation is now turned over to you.
Thank you, Rochelle, and let me just say good afternoon to everybody Central and East Coast, and good morning to everybody on the West Coast. I also want to say that as part of your participation and involvement with TASA, when we complete this program, if you have any additional questions in the future, it doesn't have to be the next couple days, could be months or weeks from now. As participants in this program, you're more than welcome to email me, phone call me directly at my office, my cell phone. All that information will be at the end of this program. And you're more than welcome to call me, email me directly with additional questions that may come up. Also, maybe some encounters or situations come up. Feel free to call me, contact me. I do not charge, TASA does not charge for the additional support as part of this program and as part of TASA's program. Well, let's move on here, talk about some different things. Today we're coming together talking about identifying high-risk employees. What should we do? How do you spot them? What are those red flags? When you do, what are some procedures? And of course, this ties into legal issues. I do want to make a disclaimer. I am not an attorney, even though I have testified for over 20 years as a court expert in the area, including high risk and human resource issues and other issues alongside with law enforcement and security issues. So, identifying high-risk employees. What are the factors? Now, these factors we have determined based on over 25 years of research experience and hands-on. What are those 5 factors that can determine long-term success for a company in general? What are those specific the foundation? Just like building a house, you got to have a solid foundation in order for the rest of the house to be able to stand and to continue to be strong. First thing, which a lot of organizations don't do very well, and that is the quality of people hired. A lot of companies skip this area. We'll talk more about it, but do you know who you're hiring, and do you really know who you're hiring? Do you conduct a very thorough hiring process? This is probably the most important thing to do starting out, and it has a ripple effect on the people you hired, the people you've already hired, because you're hiring new people coming in who are going to work with your current people. Ironically, there's a lot of intangibles that I'll try to mention. One of them is your people that you currently have will look at who you're hiring and placing next to them, around them, or with them as an indication of your respect or lack of respect for the current employees. This causes a big effect on the culture of your business. I'm not going to get into detail, but the big key word right now across the country is culture. What are you doing from hiring to firing to training to legal issues to security? It affects your quality, your culture. Culture is the key today. Happy, positive cultures create profits, growth, etc., and reduction in significant legal issues. I could spend a whole session just on hiring, what we call smart hiring. We're going to talk a little more about that in a little bit. Secondly, physical security of the workplace. 20 years ago, this was not a serious issue that employees looked at, were concerned about, nor did we really have to worry about. Now we got active shooter, terrorism, lone wolf, disgruntled employee. Physical security of the workplace is significant. Let me tell you an interesting statistics. 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, my company would experience somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 what we call terminated employee threats to company C-level people, where an employee would be terminated and they would threaten during the termination, after the termination, or even before the termination. They would threaten C-level, HR, middle management, their supervisor, where it was really believed to be a serious threat that they needed to take very, very strong action on. We average 2 to 3 of those per year requests. I'm located in Ohio, and we're a typical company with typical types of businesses, manufacturing, labor, etc. companies in this area. Today, my company is experiencing 4 to 6 terminated employee threat calls, needs for response, 4 to 6 of those calls per month. Before, 2 to 3 per year. Now we're at 4 to 6 per month just in Ohio. My company's clients located outside of Ohio, we get another 3 or 4. We're averaging anywhere from 7 to 10 calls reference a terminated employee that is a serious threat and taken seriously, 7 to 10 per month compared to 2 to 3 per year just 10 years ago. Thoroughly trained supervisors. I had a discussion this morning with a pretty large manufacturer that is actually a national and has international offices. They're a distribution, manufacturing, warehousing. The biggest problem they had is that their supervisors that they are getting coming from other companies or that they're bringing on lack training. Thoroughly trained supervisors. Supervisors, for the most part, generally want to do a good job. The problem is we're not training them. They're going from working with people to now supervising those people or others, and they need to have training and ongoing training. And you don't have to go berserk on the training. but there should be initial training and yearly ongoing. You can also send them, obviously, to things that we're doing right now, webinars, luncheons, chambers, business, professional organizations, trade shows. They have great speakers, great information, very, very important to get, and document this training, get certificates so that you can put it in their file, because that can be used later on in a litigation to help the company defend its action. Thoroughly written company policies, manuals, job descriptions. Once again, many companies are weak in this area. They don't have manuals or policies or procedures, or they're very outdated, or simply very old. We've gone into numerous companies where these policies and manuals can be over 10 years old. Yeah, we're going to get to it. It doesn't make them money, but it sure can save them money in the litigation field. But once again, you need a roadmap if you're working for a company, especially in the management, and the employees need to know what they can do and what they cannot do. It isn't just good enough anymore compared to 20 years ago, maybe even 10 or 12 years ago. Company manuals told everybody what they can or should do. Now we got to explain certain things you cannot do, and that has become more important as time goes on. Open communication and cooperation between departments. What can I say about communication? It's an issue. We're having tough communication issues now with the millennial, with the internet, with social media. Our younger generation, some of them, and some people think many of them, are lacking in communication skills and rely too heavily on electronics. I'll leave that discussion up to each individual at a further time. So those 5 factors create what we call the positive corporate culture and stability. Hopefully, if you have all 5, if you don't, you're going to have a negative corporate culture. Once again, that word culture, here it is. It has become very important in today's companies. So, with the positive culture, corporate culture, we can reduce the number of high-risk employees. We can move on in a positive direction, and lots of other great things can happen. Talk about a little bit of limitation on public records. Now, most of you or all of you already know there's federal regulations, state regulations, Supreme Court decisions, local court decisions. So you really got to do your homework in each individual state. But to get, basic records, many times different types of license are required to gain access to records. A lot of records are public access, meaning anybody can access them, and then others must have a license, must have some kind of legal or a release. So depending on your state, depending on the laws within your state, and then you must also take in consideration the federal. As it says here, it does vary widely from state to state. And other factors come up that are listed here on this slide. And you got to be careful about online records. A lot of times they can be abstracts of the original records. You want to be careful. You want to make sure who you're dealing with. Well, which one of these next couple people that I'm going to describe here are you working with? We have a little bit of humor here, but what about the antagonist? The person that's rude and unpleasant to coworkers, vendors, and customers. And let me just say this right now. We'll be repeating this throughout this presentation, but it's important that all supervisors, management, C-level, everybody involved in the company needs to really focus their comments, their written, their observation, documentation, and their confrontation and conversation with employees about negative things. They really need to make sure it focuses around work performance and safety issues. You can't just say someone is rude and unpleasant, but you can say someone is rude, unpleasant, and is causing work performance of themselves, others, or interfering with the workflow. So you must tie it in to work performance and safety issues. Many times management supervisors don't, and probably because they've never had that basic training about that type of focus in their remarks and their judgments of workers. Amy attitude, negative attitude, brings everyone down. Amy's the type that can affect your culture. I always ask groups that I speak to, have you ever had one person in a group, on a shift, in an area, who can literally, by themselves, bring the entire group aura down from a positive to a negative? Can totally cause people not to look forward to coming to work. Cause very much negativity. Well, that affects your culture once again. Blameless Bob always has an excuse for everything. How about the early retiree? Does anybody out there, for companies that they're working with, this person's been around a while and he's beginning to practice on-the-job retirement? Those people do exist, and the reason they continue is we fail to address the work performance issues. We'll be getting more into that later in this training. And the whiner complains no matter what he or she is asked to do. And the handholder that needs constant supervision. All these types of people, they need to be addressed one-on-one. They need to be guided to what is expected of them and what they need to stop doing and what they need to start doing. Once again, what they can do and what they cannot do, what they should do and what they should not do. So who do you hire and why do you fire? We've looked at this and we put a lot of emphasis in that little resume, that sheet that tells us their history. But let's look a little further. We always tend to hire, for the most part, for what someone has done. Education, experience, training, certificates, etc. We really look hard at their history. Who they are, where they've been, what they've experienced, credentials. We hire heavily for what someone has done. But why do we fire? We always, or in most cases, work performance does play into it, but a lot of times we fire for who they are. We hire for their history and their credentials, but in many cases we fire them because of who they are. The lesson here is we need to incorporate in our hiring a little bit more about who they are. That's where some unique testing comes into play. That's where interview questions come into play. Start talking to them about certain things. Now, we have to be careful, and I know there's legal questions you can and cannot ask, but the most important question to ask an applicant is, tell me a little bit about yourself. And then we got to learn to sit back, shut up, and use the 2 ears God gave us. That is the most important question to ask if you want to know who they are. Tell me a little bit about yourself. You will be surprised the amount of information that they share with you. And anything and everything they share with you is voluntary on their part, so therefore you can avoid any kind of legal accusations, etc. Once again, I'm going to say it again. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Physical profile of high-risk employee, do they really exist? There's no real solid physical profile. You just can't accurately determine who is a risk based on just like demographics. But there are other ways that you will be able to see. Dishonest employees come basically shapes and sizes, ethnic, sexes, religions. It don't matter. So profiling or looking for a profile, you've got your work cut out for you. And I don't think it's going to happen, and that's why we really want to stress that that's not the way to go. Now, here's an example for Ohio. It adds complications. Most states have duplicate of what you see here. Duty of the employer to protect employees and frequenters. Duty of the employer to furnish safe place of employment. So basically, you start hiring somebody and you haven't done a very good background check on them, and you find out later after they assault another employee that they've got 3 or 4 assaults, physical assault charges, anger issues, terminations based on confrontations with management employees. So once again, some of the state laws can come back to bite you if you haven't done your pre-employment background screening to the very extent it should be. Most employers need to do a better job on their pre-employment. Is litigation skyrocketing? Absolutely. Wrongful termination suits filed over the last 20 years skyrocketed by more than 2,000. You have to ask yourself why. I know the majority of the participants here are attorneys, and you probably already know the answer. We're not doing a very good job back to the basics. Training supervisors, updating the manuals and procedures, and the documentation, observation documentation is lacking in the documentation. Also, go back to one of my original statements. You must get the company to focus on work performance and safety issues. And they must talk in that tone, document in that tone, and we're just not seeing it, and it's opening the floodgates for wrongful termination. Of course, you got all these discrimination issues in there, but the way to defend against those is to show proper observation documentation and consistency throughout the years. Okay, civil cases don't compare to these others. So poor hiring, what's it do? And these are conservative. Terminating an employee who's just paid $20,000 usually costs double. They say pretty much now whatever that person is paid will cost you a minimum of 2 to 3 to 4 times to replace that person when you get done hiring, replacing, training, etc. So there's incentive for being better at the hiring process and avoiding those high-risk employees that we know little about before we hire them. Wrongful termination settlements, obviously, everybody knows it could be A to Z. And in the former employees, the jury verdicts, former employees won, came out on top in about 64% of the cases because of hiring decisions and current employee or management issues in dealing with them. Once again, back to observation documentation and confronting them. So, once again, hiring an entry-level employee that doesn't work out after 3 months, minimal additional costs can be that. Let's talk about negligent hiring factors. An individual in question obviously is an employee of the company. The employee was unfit for the job, and the employer knew or should have known the employee was unfit for employment, and somebody got injured due to the employee's acts that should not have been hired, and the employer owed a duty of care to the plaintiff, as I pointed out previously as an example in Ohio law and the similar states. Number 3 is something to be very cognizant of. I've been testifying as a court expert for over 20 years. The courts really focus on, did the employer know or should have known the employee was unfit for employment, or knew or should have known due to their action the employee should have not continued to work for the employer. Take a notice of number 3 because that gets debated quite a bit in court. And the hiring of the employee obviously was the proximate cause of the injuries to the plaintiff. I forgot to mention about halfway through this, we'll give you an opportunity to ask some questions, so be thinking about questions, and you can type them in on the screen in that little question area. Let's talk about negligent retention factors. Now, the employee's hired. He becomes aware of the employee is potentially dangerous. The employer retains the employee knowing of the danger and has contact with potentially the dangerous employee. Innocent employees have contact with a potentially dangerous employee. The plaintiff is harmed during contact with the dangerous employee. I just had a huge case a couple months back. Company was in West Virginia, it's a very large company. It had multiple locations within a general area of West Virginia, and they had a troubled employee, and this gentleman was a problem. He could not get along with other employees. Secondly, he scared the employees because they thought he was actually dangerous. They were working around chemicals that are stored in silos. And here you have employees who are nervous about him, scared about him, don't want to work with him, and do not believe he should be working there and on the property at all. What is the company's reaction? He is at Division A of this company. Their response to that is they transfer him to work at Division B, another building location for them, and he goes to B building and does the same thing, causes people to be nervous. They feel he's a threat. They think he could cause some serious damage. If he gets near those chemicals, it could explode and blow up 3-4 block area. They don't want to work with him. What is the company's solution to him being in B? They transfer him to C, another location building. Now, when he gets to C, those people all know all about him before he gets there. Let's remember that employee-to-employee conversation is faster than fiber optics. So everybody knows that's not going to be a secret. What happens when he goes to C is within the first week, he has a physical confrontation with an employee who was not comfortable with him, who said something to him and got physically attacked, suffered severe injury to shoulder blade separation, contusion, minor contusion to the head, a couple other things, and the proverbial "I told you so." How is that company going to defend against that type of retention on a suspicious and an employee who has documentation of not getting along, being a threat, other employees being scared, and when they get into his history, they're going to find additional things. They didn't do their homework on their pre-employment hiring. Perfect example of what not to do. Background checks, all sorts of different things. Remember, on the criminal background checks, we're going through the old check the box debate now, and what can be used and not used, and do we have a right as an applicant? Do we have to check the box on criminal history? A lot of this stuff, driving records and stuff, are public record, but you're going to get a signed release from every applicant to avoid any kind of issues here. You obviously need to let them know you're going to be doing a background check that could include the following, and let them know, let them sign off. Now, if they don't want to sign off, a company has the right not to process them or consider them. But you must get written permission, and every applicant you should. reference checks, interviewing, testing, credential verification, everything is included and should be covered under that release. Can some of these things be obtained without a release? Yes, but on all company hiring, play it safe, do it right, and get a release for the entire pre-employment screening. Also, you'll notice there's testing versus integrity profiles. Those are becoming popular because they tell us who they are more of what we talked about before, and it's another alternative way to really find out, who you are really hiring. Do they fit in your culture? So that's a side note on that. Physical profile. Obviously, you can make reasonable assessments based on their conduct, integrity, and judgment. But once again, profile can be a dangerous word. We really want to stay focused on when we're looking at someone's work performance, as a current employee, and we want to look at their past behavior when we're hiring them. A person's past behavior often proves to be the best indicator of their future behavior. If you have an employee that was terminated from 3 different jobs over a 10-year period, I doubt whether any amount of money you're going to pay them is going to change them. And if you have an applicant who has multiple criminal charges, I doubt whether you're going to change them. And on the other end, I'm not against hiring someone who has one criminal record in the past. I think we all can attest to the fact that we weren't perfect in our lives, especially earlier, younger days, and that we could and have screwed up. And what's the time frame between the last criminal behavior versus the hiring date? A person was charged with theft, and it was 15 years ago. I don't think we should really get rattled about that. Someone that was charged with theft 3 times in the last 3 years, I think we want to be a little leery of hiring them to run a cash register, to handle any kind of equipment or stuff or power tools that, could easily be stolen. So we got to make some discretion decisions there. You need to look at the entire history, the time frame, etc. I have no problem. There's programs. People are hiring people retrained in prisons. And once again, why were they sent to prison? How long's it been? What kind of training did they get? Etc. We have some really great success stories that I could get into about people that were in jail, were incarcerated. Once again, I look at what was the crime, how many crimes, how many charges, how many times were they in prison, once or 3 times? What's the history? So be objective. You'd be surprised. We don't want to judge too quick on people that have made a mistake here or there. Many times those people have actually learned life's lesson. Look at the totality of the history. But remember, the recent, and I say the recent past, predicts the current future. Once again, the recent past predicts the current future. Somebody that has 3 theft charges in the last 2.5, 3 years is probably still got a mindset to steal things. Someone that had 2 theft charges, they're 45 years old now, and the theft charges are when they were in their 20s. I don't think that's going to predict any of their current action. And I think we need to not be concerned about that. Once again, look at the total package timetable. You got to know what to look for. Bottom line, proper observation of workers. So let's talk about some of the things we're looking for. A lot of times, workers give us plenty of clues. I actually did a training earlier this morning and was talking to the management team, and they were management team working in a warehouse and a manufacturer. And some of them were supervisors in the were supervisors in the manufacturing building, and some of them were supervisors in the warehouse. And one of the supervisors that works in the warehouse, I asked him, how do you manage? And he said, I spend the majority of my day telling people around the warehouse, get back to work, get back to work, get back to work. He was dead serious. I said, how often do you go around and tell people to get back to work? And he told me it's constant. And he said several dozen times per shift. And he just took over a month and a half ago as a supervisor for that warehouse, and he is dumbfounded by how much he has to tell them to get back to work. His game plan is to sit down, to start documenting. He's going to, what we told him to do was sit down with them one-on-one, explain to them they need to get back to work, and you don't need to have to remind them, and they need to change their work performance. Give them 30 days, come back, see if they've improved. If they haven't, give them a final warning that they need to improve their work performance. If they don't, the company is going to terminate these people that they have to keep begging to get back to work. So it's unique. Signs are there all the time. Walking around, observing, engaging will tell you and show you a lot. We have cameras that can catch a lot of their work performance. So look for physical signs. You're talking about drugs and different things, you're going to see these things. Increased absenteeism. Work patterns are changing. Decrease in work performance. Relationships with others. Are other employees starting to complain? This guy's tough to work with. He's touchy. He's interfering with my ability to get my job done. You've got to be looking at this. Substance abuse. Obviously increased actions. All right. It is very clear that many times employees give us more clues than we really realize. If we just walk around, observe, engage, and interact, you will see here a lot more going on. Change in moods and theft. So, you see an increase in theft, that's an indication. What about some physical signs? And I am not going to go through all these, but, can you terminate someone for having a blank stare and obviously or slurred speech? No, but those are clues that, are you seeing that on a semi-regular basis? Is their work performance decreasing? Are they getting sloppy on their safety? You can document all those along with physical signs, and obviously that's going to give you the ability to send them for a drug test. In many cases, you're going to come back with a positive test. It also tells people, even if the negative test comes back, that you're monitoring, that you care, that you want them to be fit and safe for work. So, lots of things to look at on what's going on there. Increased absenteeism, it's a known fact. Mondays and Fridays, around holidays, before and after, they start taking those days off, calling in last-minute call-offs, wanting to leave work early around those days. All are indications of potential substance abuse. They have these emergencies, lots of problems, health problems, impromptu vacation time. Those are the kind of things you want to look at. And I would suggest along with these, you're going to see work performance issues. You're going to see safety issues, or both. You're going to get complaints from coworkers. You're going to start to see things. These all need to be documented. Document them, You can use that as a reason for a conference, a warning. You can use it for reasons for testing, drug testing. So do your homework, do your observation documentation, and utilize your drug testing, utilize your work performance programs. How about that worker that disappears all the time, leaves work area, bathroom breaks, water fountain, etc.? Unexplained differences from the job. Nobody can find this employee, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they appear. I had a manufacturer last year. We were called in because they were having a tremendous problem. They believed it was due to substance abuse. We did surveillance on the parking lot, and we were seeing employees coming out, getting into cars together, and lighting up something. We kind of doubted whether it was a cigarette. We then had some other information. Certain people were selling certain drugs in the facility, and we knew that they were selling it in the facility, going out on breaks, getting high, and we trained the supervisor's management to observe different things. And between that and our surveillance outside, we were able to test several employees that were positive. What precipitated this for this company is they had an employee overdose and die on the floor at the manufacturing, and that's what finally made them call us to fix the problem, a death. I don't think that's a necessary requirement for companies to take action. There was plenty of indicators at this location of what was going on, from the drug abuse to the work performance to the issues. Ironically, we ended up doing an undercover operation and arresting a supervisor, mid-level supervisor, as one of the main drug suppliers. Changing work patterns, this is something you want to really look at. Personal problems, issues, inconsistent quality of work and periods of productivity changing. These are the things, once again, we need to really look at. When we have people that aren't doing their job or they're influenced by drugs or alcohol, you're going to see all of these type of things happening. When you start having people not remembering or recalling instructions, compounding mistakes, once again, these are observable, reportable, documentation stuff that needs to be done. There's other things here that I'm showing on the screen. These are all mental, these are all work performance issues, and we need to document that this person is having difficulty handling complex situations. They have lapsing concentrations, they're missing deadlines. They're missing deadlines this year, and they never missed deadlines last year. You can show a decrease in comparing them to this month, to several months ago, etc. Those are good documentations. Those are good things to document, once again, to confront that individual, to have a cause for change by them, to drug test, to do other things, to bring it to a discussion, to bring it to a plan of improvement. All right, Q&A time. If you have some questions, go ahead, submit them, and Rochelle will let me know, and I'll answer a few.
Thanks, Tim. If all the attendees can enter in the passcode today, which is employees, you can enter this into the Q&A box, which is located to the left of your screen, and any questions that you have for Tim, you can enter those as well. Our first question is, can you give an example of proper observation documentation?
Yes. There's all sorts of that proper. All those things I listed, anything that has already been listened and talked about, from the interaction of an employee with another employee, problem employee who doesn't get along with other employees and causes work production decrease or mistakes, complaints from employees, all the physical stuff that can be from potentially from drugs. It can be disappearance quite a bit, leaving their workstation when they're not supposed to, coming back from breaks late, arriving late, leaving early, calling off frequently, not up to production results, anything that's a work performance, not wearing their goggles in safety zones, not properly operating a tow motor. So anything physically they're doing, anything that interferes or decreases their work performance, anything that interferes or decreases another employee's work performance. All those things that I listed and showed are good documentation things to be cognizant of.
The last question for this section, can a background check be done after an employee has been hired?
That's a great question. A background check can be done. There's two things on this. Number one, some companies will do a background check. They hire them, and then subsequently they will do an additional background check on the subject, the employee, every year. I have a company that every 3 years they send me all their current employees, and we do another background check on all of them every 3 years because they're concerned that something may have taken place, let's just say criminally, that they weren't aware of. So the answer is yes, you can. Most companies in that case will do a background, and then they have a system or a process where they do background checks again every so often. Once again, it's good to list that in your hiring papers that they sign off on. You understand we will do a pre-employment background check, and also after you're hired, we have the right, and we are notifying you that we will be doing periodic background checks on you and other employees at our discretion, or every 3 years, or every 3 years and at our discretion when we feel necessary. So it can be done, and it's best to notify them in writing and have them sign off.
Thanks, Tim. You can continue with the presentation.
Thank you. Okay, that one question was about different things. As I go through some more slides, we can talk about other things that you can document. And I really want to stress that in the observation, we need to get our managers, supervisors to observe on a more regular basis, to interact on a regular basis, to check documents that are submitted that reflect their work performance. You have an employee who travels as a salesman, and their requirement is to bring receipts back for all, use of company credit card. And you have an employee that doesn't do that or doesn't submit all the receipts and makes excuses that he lost it or she lost it. It's people or employees that don't do the things that are clearly outlined that need to be done. Those are indicators of sloppiness, but those are indicators of not conforming to the work performance issues, and a lot of times there's reasons. So what about relationships with others? How about employees that overreact, get upset, angry, argue with supervisors, managers, and coworkers? Others that withdraw themselves, don't interact, don't work, are supposed to be working with other employees and refuse to work, or are never around, and other employees are picking up their slack. Once again, those are great observations, great documentations. A lot of times, you will have employees make comments, say stuff. We also have been utilizing the 800 hotline more for companies on a national basis. Remarkably, the hotline, the anonymous hotline, is a great tool. We're seeing more and more companies utilizing it, and it's very effective. There's still a stigma out there. Some employees don't want to rat or narc on someone, but if they have the opportunity to anonymously call it in and leave that message, which gets translated into a written complaint and gets to the company, we see across the board more information coming into companies through hotlines. More employees are comfortable with it. Some are worried about retaliation, so once again, the confidential hotline is another great option, and there's some really cool technology that goes with it. But the bottom line is, we're seeing hotlines utilized more, and when they are, we're seeing more information coming to those specific companies. Employees that are borrowing money, persistent job transfer requests, asking for cash advances, borrowing money from multiple employees, supervisors. These people are really entrenched into some serious issues and problems going on with their life, and most likely they're having problems with the work performance too. Complainers about problems at home, different things, complaints from coworkers or about coworkers, all this kind of thing, all this relationship stuff are strong indicators something wrong's going on. Now, drug and alcohol users in the workplace, I could do a whole seminar on just the opiate problem, where it came from, how it's built up over time. I'm in Ohio. We have one of the worst opiate problems in the entire United States. Actually, the county I'm in is one of the highest opiate overdose and abuse counties definitely in Ohio, but also on a national basis. Lots of reasons for that. But substance abusers, drug and alcohol, are 5 times more likely to be injured on the job. Without a doubt, they put themselves in injury. But this next statistic is what really bothers me and what I really want to emphasize to all the participants today. The drug and alcohol abuser, they're 5 times more to injure themselves on a job. I don't want to see them injured, but if anybody, quote unquote, deserves to be injured, it should be the user. I don't say that in a happy way, but here's the problem. The abusers are 40 times more likely to involve a coworker in their accident. So 40 times higher rate to injure, killing, causing serious accidents to coworkers. And I tell everybody, if your son, daughter, wife, husband, cousin, relative was working there, would you want to have an atmosphere, a culture, a procedure where you allow that kind of statistic to exist? And obviously the answer is no. This is a great argument for drug and alcohol testing, pre-employment testing, current testing, for-cause testing, random testing, everything. And we can't take the chances. Now with the opiate epidemic, it's even more important. They are absent 66% more often than their peers. They perform only at about 2/3 of their true potential. Now, once again, what do we got here? We have somebody who's not doing their job, and we're asking our good workers, will you please pick up the slack? How long is that good worker going to be cooperative or want to or willing to pick up the slack? And how does that affect the culture? The answers are all not good to that. Now, in drug testing, I think everybody knows we have pre-employment. You can't do alcohol testing pre-employment because it's legal. We're going to get into same problems here with pre-employment with medical marijuana. Obviously, you have numerous states with medical marijuana. Ohio, where I am, we just passed medical marijuana only use here in the state. We're in the process within the next 6 months of launching the program. But pre-employment, reasonable suspicion is based on observation and documentation supported by training. It's one of the more effective testing programs, and it can help you sort out high-risk employees. Post-accident should be automatic. You're involved in an accident, all parties should be tested. Not only the party that might have caused it, not only the party that got injured, all parties in all accidents. We have found some very unique situations in accidents of who was positive, who we didn't think would be positive, involved in that accident or altercation. Return to work, once they're positive, they need to have a negative test. Random has become more acceptable, and there's different ways of doing it. There's some great programs and really sensible ways to do random testing. And once again, drug testing in all 5 areas reduces your high-risk problems significantly. Obviously, increased accidents is a problem. We want to be cognizant of that. Theft. The FBI has identified employee theft as one of the fastest-growing crimes in America. I just got a case two days ago. A highly, highly paid individual for this company was caught on film without his knowledge of coming in Sunday morning, 5 a.m., and walking out and loading 3 or 4 boxes of unknown equipment in his car. Of course, what are the clues? Sunday morning, 4 or 5 in the morning, company's closed on Sunday, coming in and loading boxes into his car. Inventory supports the fact that those numerous items were missing. Already we've determined close to $20-some thousand worth of theft. Tomorrow morning, I am going to go interview this subject, and I am hopefully going to get a confession and for him to sign and admit that he stole it. This person is a 6-figure paid person. Look what they're losing. Look what the problems are. And the key to the problem is I suspect that there is some significant substance abuse issues going on here that need to be addressed. 65% is driven by drug and alcohol. It's not only against the company, but the co-workers. It takes money out of everybody's pocket, causes healthcare costs, causes other things. It can ruin or reduce bonuses, pay raises. It trickles down. So here's a very key thing. If it's not documented, it did not happen. And I want to stress this. If it's not documented, it did not happen. Okay? So what are repercussions of not identifying employees who have quit their jobs, but keep coming to work? 85% of the workers stated they could work harder on the job. They could work harder. Half of them claimed they could double their efficiency if they wanted to. Good employees are forced to pick up negative employee slack. Now, how long do you think the good employees are going to pick up the slack? And what's the long-term, what's the culture effects? That's huge on your culture. We've got to identify those high-risk employees. They can significantly damage the culture and other things connected to that company. So I want to stop there so we could take a few questions. That completes the seminar. Rochelle, do you have some questions?
Yes, we have time for 2 questions. Just so you guys know, all unanswered questions will be sent directly to Tim to answer. Also, if you have any additional questions for him that you have not submitted, you can feel free to contact him. Our first question, how do you recommend employers respond when an employee tells an employer that he or she has an order of protection against a spouse? Do you put the reception on alert with a photo of the spouse?
Yeah, we're talking about domestic violence comes to work. And once again, that's a whole nother thing, but let me give you some basics on that. First thing I want to tell you is we're not doing a good job in protecting people that are going through some tough relationships, and I will say especially almost the majority of it is females. We need to do a better job. How do we do a better job? Number one, we need to tell key people, if there's security and key people, we need to provide the police with a picture, a license plate of the subject's boyfriend, husband's car, and their license plate, picture of that subject to the police, asking them to be in the area a little bit more and to respond faster. We need to give that car and that picture to other key people in the business. We need to help that person who's coming to work. Maybe someone walks outside with her to her car and that. We might even filter her phone calls, maybe change her office location. But definitely the receptionist needs to have all that information and be able to recognize that person instantly if they start coming in the door and be able to respond to it. If that person wants additional information on that, you can email me direct. We can have a longer discussion. The next question, Rochelle?
Sure. What if that high-risk employee is of a high-level position like a VP?
That is the million-dollar question that I get all the time, and it is a tough question because it does happen. First thing you have to do, if you're an employee and you're below the person that is the high risk, you're below the person that's the abuser, you're below the person that's the sexual harasser, you're below the person that's the bully. We get that quite often. First thing, you as an employee, you need to document all the things that took place that reflect the interaction, the negative interaction between you and that supervisor or manager. Without that documentation, you're going to have a hard time motivating anybody in that company higher up to do anything just from the nature of it. So first is extreme detailed documentation. Secondly, you need to go to someone above that person who is higher ranked than that person to report it. An option is you can contact an attorney and have that attorney contact the upper management above that person representing you and keeping you confidential until the proper time to reveal who you are or not reveal who you are. So those are some quick answers.
Thank you so much, Tim. In addition to being your best source for testifying and consulting experts for more than 60 years, TASA also offers free interactive webinars, expert-written articles, research reports on expert witnesses, including the Challenge History Report 2.0 and Expert Profile 360. Please remember that if you're applying for CLE credit, you must attend for the full 60 minutes of the presentation. You are also required to complete the survey at the end of the program. Please note you will be receiving your certificates via email in 24 to 48 hours after the presentation. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending, and most especially Timothy Dimoff for his time and effort in creating this presentation. If you would like to speak with Tim, or if you would like to speak with a TASA representative regarding an expert witness for a case that you are working on, please contact TASA at 1-800-523-2319. One of my colleagues will be following up with you regarding your feedback on today's presentation. This concludes our program for today.